So we talked about the Indy Draft Guide. That is my baby the last couple of seasons. But my other baby is the Build-A-Ballard series. So if you guys don't know what that is, from my writing with SB Nation back years ago, I mean, gosh, SB Nation, it's almost 4 or 5 years ago at this point, to even now with Sports Illustrated, when I'm writing about the Colts and draft season, I had the idea years ago to really try to identify what type of players fit Chris Ballard. And a big part of this series is about the athletic profile of players he's drafted at certain positions. So if we're looking at a defensive end, we look at the measurables of every defensive end that Chris Ballard has drafted. What are the common traits? Do they all have a certain arm length? Do they all have a certain explosiveness? Do they all have a certain, 40 time? That's kind of what this series does. It tries to isolate those certain testing aspects to find which guys fit the Chris Ballard mold. And we're able to kind of build this picture of what Chris Ballard likes in the draft. It's a very imperfect series. It's subjective too at times. There is a subjective element to it. But I do think it is one of those things where, if you have a bullseye, it typically hits somewhere on the bullseye. It's not going to be perfect in the middle every single time, but I do think we can get a rough estimation of what the Colts are looking for in the draft. Now, one thing I do want to add about this series, because I know there will be comments about this and people talk about this, this series is not about finding the best player for the Colts. Because look, the Colts don't always draft the best player. We've seen time and time again, they don't always draft the best player. It's about finding the players that the Colts typically like. There are other series out there we're talking about players that would make the Colts better, writing up these big articles about Brock Bowers being awesome because he's such a great prospect. But this series is more so about Chris Ballard likes this mold of player. This mold of player is in the draft. So therefore, he might like this player in the draft. That's kind of what this series is looking for.